Welcome to Flipped Classroom. We're looking at measurement, and this lesson is on the circumference of a circle. Our learning intention for this video is we are learning about the circumference of a circle, and our success criteria is I am successful when I can label the parts of a circle, I understand what pi is, and I can calculate the circumference of a whole or part circle. So I've got a circle here and I've got some parts labeled, and we just need to remember what they are. So the red part that goes from one side to the other is called a diameter. The green part that runs from the center of the circle out to the edge is a radius. And the part that goes all the way around is called a circumference. So the circumference, which we label as C, is the perimeter of a circle, and that's the outside length around the circle. So a real world example would be your bike wheel. The circumference of your bike wheel is the distance that you travel when your wheel moves one full rotation. The circumference can be calculated two different ways. If we know the radius, we can use the formula C equals 2 pi r. And if we know the diameter, we can use the formula C equals pi times d, where r is the radius and d is the diameter. Pi itself is the ratio between the circumference and the diameter of a circle. So pi is roughly 3.14159, and that's to 5 decimal places. But pi is an irrational number. It goes on forever and it can't be simplified into a fraction. For many applications of this, where we're only looking at 2 or 3 decimal places, the approximation of 3.14 or 22/7 will work. However, now that we've got calculators and computers that can calculate pi to many decimal places, it's completely fine to use those as well. So here I have two examples. I have defined the circumference of the following circles to 2 decimal places. Most times they will tell you how many decimal places to solve it to. On the left hand side I have my thinking, and on my right hand side I have two columns, one for part A and one for part B. For my thinking for part A, I'm going to start off with writing down the circumference formula. Now I look at that picture and I have the diameter, so I can use the formula C equals pi d. Now I'm going to fill in those unknown values. So I don't know what C is yet, but I do know the diameter is 4, so I can write C equals pi times 4. Now I can calculate the answer, and I will just type that into my calculator. I'll find the pi button, I'll multiply it by 4, and I get something that looks like this. It does go on forever. I'll write down quite a few decimal places so that I know that I'm going to be accurate when I'm rounding. And then the final part is to round the answer and then write down the units. Now it says to 2 decimal places, so I'm going to round this. Now I can see that it's going to be 12.5 something. Now that 6 we need to round up because the 3rd decimal place is a 6. So I round that to 12.57 meters. Now for part B, we can follow exactly the same steps. So I'm going to start off with my step number 1, which was to write down the formula. And there it is, C equals 2 pi r. Next, I fill in the unknown values. I'm going to write it down as 2 times pi times 3.5 because that's the radius. And then I'm going to type that in my calculator again. Now this time, rounding it to 2 decimal places, if I have a look at the 3rd decimal place, it's a 5, so I need to round up. But because I round the 9 up, it's going to have a carry through. So my answer is going to be 11.00. Now it is important still to write those 2 zeros because it's 2 decimal places and that's the accuracy. And again, I've written my units after that. This time I have a quarter of a circle. And my question is asking me to find the perimeter of the following diagram. So I can see it's a quarter of a circle because it has a right angle in the corner. And I can see that if I drew that circle fully, it would have a radius of 8 millimeters. So I'm going to start off by writing down what parts of the circle I need to calculate. This way I can go through and make sure I've got everything. Now I might do this by drawing it on the diagram and highlighting each part, or I might just write it down. I've got a quarter of a circle and then I've got the 2 radii. Next, I'm going to calculate the circumference of a whole circle, and then I will quarter it because we're looking at 1/4 of a circle. But I'm not going to do any rounding until the very end. And this is important, as sometimes if you round too early, it will cause some errors in your answer, and you'll be off by 1 or 2 decimal places, and that will cause you to get the question wrong. So again, I'm going to follow the steps from before. So I've written down my formula, 2 pi r, because we know the radius. I'm going to write down my values. I'm going to type that into my calculator. And then because we're only looking at a quarter of a circle, I'm going to quarter that. So this quarter of a circle, or quarter of the circumference, is 12.5663706. It goes on forever. I'm going to leave that in my calculator. I'm not going to change it yet. I'm not going to clear it or rewrite it, but I'm going to write it down for my notes. The next step is I need to add up all the parts. So the perimeter is going to be that quarter circumference plus 2 times the radius, because we have 2 radii. And I type that into my calculator. As I said before, I left that number in my calculator. So all I have to do is click on plus 2 times 8, and it'll use that whole number. And I get 28.5663706. And now I can round off and then write the units. And I get 28.57 millimeters. Now, if I rounded off too early, let's say I rounded off back at C equals 50.27, that would have caused an error coming through, and I may not have got the same answer at the bottom. So you must make sure that you use the whole number until that last step where you round it. For our reflection today, why is it important to know that ratio between the circumference and the diameter, and where might it be useful? As always, like the video and subscribe for more videos for learning.